one of the things that I found when I was writing this book is that there are loads of tools or processes or strategies, whatever you want to call them, that are just widely used. They're like bread and butter, sort of basic things in businesses, in governments, in charities, in basically any large organization. And that includes things like having a communications plan. It includes things like doing a root cause analysis if you want to get to the heart of a problem. It includes things like project management, doing a pre-mortem so that you're sort of anticipating problems before they happen. Loads of things that for reasons that I still am not really very sure about, they are just not happening in education. And not only that, but there's almost a a sort of a like an allergy to things like this.
Welcome to Rethinking Education. Education's critical friend.
Tara, Elie, welcome back to the Rethinking Education podcast.
Hello, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming back, because we're going to do the return fixture this time. So this is part two of this series of two mini pods that we're doing about these two big ideas, I think. One that I've been very immersed in for the last few years, and one that you have. So we the last episode was all about mattering, and the importance of mattering, student mattering and staff mattering, and how this is not really something that has featured strongly in people's thinking around behavior over the years. And it was really eye-opening for me, for you, talking about the difference between mattering and belonging. Lots of people are talking about belonging at the moment, and you were sort of saying essentially that belonging is downstream of mattering, right? Like belonging is something, is a symptom, or not a symptom, more like a consequence. It's an outcome of mattering, among many others.
Yeah.
And that was really interesting. And then I've also been thinking a lot about behavior in schools and the ideas that I've been immersed in for the last really 10 years or so now around implementation and improvement science. And mattering, I think there's lots of cross-pollination there. There's lots of links, I think, to the work that you do. And I think that we're both onto something with the work that we're doing, and that could potentially be helpful for schools. And so you have kindly agreed to reverse the favor. Is that the right way to put it? And to interview me about my stuff.
It's most certainly is a favor. How exciting to get to interview you on your podcast. Are you ready?
I'm braced for impact.
I'm loving it. I'm loving the compatibility of our work, James. And I think it's sort of stemmed my interest, as well as enjoying collaborating in the training room together, comes around your book, published no less, on making change stick. I want to know about that. You know, how did you come to write a book and write Making Change Stick? Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. And so I didn't really plan to do that. My work has mainly been focused around learner effectiveness or self-regulated learning over the years. And I did a PhD in that. And back in 2014, so this is going back some years now, nearly 12 years, I was halfway through my PhD, and I happened to be in uni on this day when there was a conference called Implementation Science. And I didn't know what implementation science was at the time. I'd never really heard of it, but I just thought it sounded interesting. The strapline was something about lasting change in real world context or something, and that was very much on my mind. And so I went to this conference, and it just blew me away. And so I learned, first of all, that implementation science is a new field of study that's emerged in healthcare. So there's an implementation science journal, and it's a health journal, and it's aimed really it's about scaling up what works. So it's about, like, if you've got an intervention or an innovation or a therapeutic treatment that you know works but isn't being implemented widely, then how do you scale that up? How do we implement this so that it becomes just a part of people's routine practice? And for a whole range of reasons, that doesn't happen automatically. And this has a very long tail. If you go back to, when people first discovered that it's a good idea to wash your hands when you're doing surgery on somebody, like the research on that was in like probably 50 years or more before that became a routine part of the practice of surgeons, and millions of people died prematurely as a result of that sort of lag, if you like. And there's a famous example more recently of a hospital in the States, the Cincinnati Children's Hospital, where they had a very high incidence of hospital admissions due to asthma. And we know how to fix asthma among kids. You give them inhalers, and that's really good at suppressing symptoms and preventing symptoms from escalating. Well, the kids weren't using their inhalers, basically. And they were like, well, why is that? And one thing that I found early on is that in healthcare, the on average, it takes something like 17 years for a piece of evidence-based practice, like a Ventolin inhaler, for example, to achieve 14% coverage across the healthcare system as a whole. And for the people listening rather than watching, Tara's eyebrows just shot through the ceiling, which is the response that people often get. Like, that's terrible, isn't it? 17 years. People talk a lot about the 17-year lag, but the other number there, 14%, is, I think, even more alarming. That's really bad. That tells us that like the vast majority of treatments that are being given to people in hospitals, healthcare centers, are suboptimal. There's evidence that there's a better way of doing things, and that's not happening. And it's a really widespread problem. And one way that the implementation scientists have found to overcome this is to use slice teams, to use what I call slice teams. They call them sometimes vertical slices, diagonal slices, transformation zones, change teams. They go by many names. I call them slice teams. And you get a bunch of different types of people sitting around the table together, instead of just having a small number of senior leaders pulling the shots, which is what usually happens. And so going back to that Cincinnati example, they implemented a slice approach where they got school nurses and pharmacists and asthma patients themselves and their families, and they got them all sitting around the table together saying, like, what is going on here? Why are there so many kids coming into hospital with really bad asthma symptoms? And the school nurses said things like, kids are forgetful, right? And they just leave their medication at home. Or maybe they stay with their one parent one night and another parent another night, and it's just at the other one's house. So they're like, right, well, let's just make sure that it's always available in school. And for those kids with 2 homes, we'll give those two inhalers, right? And the pharmacist said things like, people don't pick up their prescriptions often. Maybe they don't have a car, they work late or whatever. And so they delivered the meds to people's homes. The patients themselves said things like, we've got damp and mold in the home and my landlord won't do anything about it. So they were like, right, here's some squirty bottles and sprays and rubber gloves. And in some cases, here's some legal aid to take on like negligent landlords. So essentially they did this like a root cause analysis. They looked at what are the problems that are preventing the widespread routine use of this effective treatment. And they just sort of thought creatively about how to solve each of those problems as they arose. And that had an incredible impact on patient outcomes. Though they reduced the admission rate by 50% within 3 years, the readmission rate reduced by 50%, massive reductions in absenteeism from the workplace, from schools, massive financial savings for the hospital. It's like a win-win-win-win-win thing. And this is one of many examples of this happening in the implementation science literature. And yet it is still very much a minority thing. Like the default thing is that we have a pyramidal world, and that small number of leaders make call the shots, and they just often are not having the impacts that they think they're going to have. And the punchline to this whole thing is that the research says that when we implement change in this way using slice teams, and there's more to it than that, but the slice team is the big idea, then we can achieve 80% uptake within 3 years, which is unbelievable, right? And so that was my entry point into this world. And I was like, oh my goodness, like if we can figure out how to import that thinking into schools, the impact that could have on student outcomes, whether that's reading and maths or attendance or behavior or mental health or parental engagement, staff retention, recruitment, whatever it might be, we can import those practical strategies into education. We could see insane
Mm.
improvements in all kinds of areas. And so began this sort of like this 10-year process. It nearly broke me, honestly. It's been full on. And so I started reading everything that I could from the implementation science literature. And then I found that there's this other thing called improvement science, which comes earlier in the process. So that's when you haven't really got the Ventolin inhaler yet. You haven't got your strategy, but you've got this problem and you're trying to understand it from the user's perspective, and you're iterating and trying things out and collecting data. And then there's also loads of stuff in the business literature, in political science, behavioral science, psychology, diffusion of innovations, research, like studying how ideas spread through populations or often fail to. And so I read all of this stuff, which took ages, and then sort of corralled it all together into this program called Making Change Stick, which I've been running in schools for about the last 7 years or so, all over the world, with amazing results. We did a national pilot in Wales, which went insanely well. And then the book came out a year ago. It was in January this year, last year rather. And then right about now, I've almost finished making. There's an online sort of resource suite, if you like, that goes along with this, because the book is great, but a book is just a book. There's all these resources and like facilitator guides and videos and quizzes and slides and activities and so on for people to apply these ideas to real world change initiatives in their schools. And so I'm almost at the end of this, like harnessing all of this stuff together and corralling it into useful shapes to put out into the world. And so yeah, that's how this work came about.
Oh, there's so much that was kind of firing in my mind, which often happens when we talk about these two areas of our work. At the moment, that the idea that how we don't do more connection between services came out in your story, James. I just thought, of course, health are ahead on some things and we need to learn from them. And of course, we need to be speaking to housing and adult social care and all of the services.
Yeah.
And, we do it in some areas, don't we? We're like, okay, relational practice. Now let's take that from schools and into the youth justice system in some of the work I'm doing. Like the services need to connect. There's so much that we can learn from health. And being separate hasn't really served us well in education, because we're now going, oh my goodness, we need to learn what social workers know, and we need to learn what the special schools and autism specialists know. But connecting the services that you've done in your work is vital. And I think it's a really important and relatively new way of thinking, is inviting all the services to cross over. And how much quicker we're going to upskill us in some of the really salient issues that happen in education and other institutions. So that excited me. The slice teams, I think I've in the past incorrectly called it splice teams, but we get
That's something different.
So slightly more dramatic, which as a drama teacher, of course I'm not doing slice teams, I'm doing splice teams. But I really like it because it, from the Matamin perspective, it gives voice. And in schools, once the TA's got a voice on whether hands up for silence works or not, then we actually will get whole school implementation as well, because everyone feels that they are part of the journey. So that mattering construct where has everyone got a voice, I just love it. And schools really get a crackle when everyone's part of it. So that's excited me. And this idea, when you said about it takes time, 10 years, it almost broke me. When people say you should do your PhD, thank you for reminding me. Genuine, physical, emotional pain.
To be honest, yeah. So it doesn't normally take that long. My one was 8 years.
Yeah.
So my PhD wasn't even in this. The PhD came before this.
Right.
Most people do it in 3 or 4, though. Mine was a longitudinal study. So we followed 4 cohorts of kids from year 7 through to GCSE, which takes 8 years. So that's why that happened.
That's what happens.
Yeah.
That's what happens. I really love gaining a great understanding on what you've done and where making change stick, what it's born of. I'm just thinking in the book, if you were to give a sort of an overview, what are the key ideas in the book that schools will, you know, serve to gain from, and just, how does it apply to behaviour?
Yeah, right. So I mean, so it's just to go back onto into that, like the big idea really that drives this whole approach is this idea of the slice team. And so in a school, like usually the shots are called, like behavior is
Mm.
run by the senior leader responsible for behavior, right? And it's seen as their responsibility largely. And when they stand up in a staff briefing or in a whatever training session, you know that they're going to talk about the behavior policy or clarifying what needs to happen or whatever. And it's very much done in this sort of top-down way that this one person has the answers to whole school behavior, and they're just going to sort of tell everybody what they need to do, and then everybody will do that, and behavior will be great. And often that doesn't really work very well. Certainly in the schools that I've worked in, the behavior has been really challenging, even when the school leadership team don't really know it. I think there's often a bit of a halo effect, isn't there? When the school leader, a bit like the Queen, or I guess the King now, thinks the world is made of smells of paint because everyone, paints everything before they visit there, right? Like senior leaders have a bit of a halo effect, and the world that they see is not the world of the NQT, right? They're seeing the newly qualified teacher sees a very different version of reality.
Yeah,
And so instead of that, you have a slice team where you have that person. Absolutely, it's not anti-leadership. That person still plays a really important role in this, but they also are a part of a team involving middle leaders, early career teachers, like we just talked about, really experienced teachers, teaching assistants who see so much stuff that we just are not capitalizing on. The Senko or Elenko or whatever you call them, sometimes kids, parents, it really the governors, site staff, lunchtime supervisors, whoever it is who that has some valid, perspective or lens on the issue that you're trying to address.
mm.
Um, and it's two things happen when you work in this way. One is that you get much better decision making, right? Because you're looking at it through these different lenses and you're thinking about how this relates to people in these different situations. But also you get buy-in, like people come with you on the journey because they can see that they are represented. And this is the link to mattering here. Like they can see that they are being listened to and genuinely, people are taking their time, leaders are taking their time to understand what is the world like from your perspective, and how can we make the school behavior system work for you and you and you, and let's stay in contact about this. We're not just going to write this perfect one-off policy from the top down and then behavior will be well. It's a process. Like implementation is a process, and you need to be constantly sort of collecting data on different aspects of what you're doing, and then the slice team reviews that data as you come in. And let's say in behavior, let's say that you've got some new rules, you've got a new like duty rota, you moved to a centralized detention system, you've got a peer mentoring thing, you've got some new process for recording behavior incidents, right? So there's all these different aspects to a behavior policy. You want to be collecting data on each of those different elements of what you're doing, and then you review it, and you have these things called pivot or persevere meetings where you say like, so how is this going with the new duty rota? Let's look at the data. And you're like, oh, there's loads of stuff happening at lunch times out on the school field. It seems there's like, maybe we need to look at that, or there's issues around the way that the canteen queue is working or whatever it might be. And so you can review the data and just tweak things in an ongoing way, bringing in this chorus of voices. And so people really feel like they are being respected, that they feel like they are a part of this process instead of that sort of top down thing happening. And there's something really interesting here, which I'd like to perhaps get into, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, which is the unspoken thing at the heart of this conversation is power, right? It's like the senior team are the most powerful players in this system. They call the shots usually, and implementing this slice team approach is essentially a process of distributing power. It's about saying that we want more people to take part in this. Um, and one thing that I've noticed, I don't know what your experience is of this, but often in schools you get this sort of us and them dynamic between the senior team and everybody else. And people are often really saying quite mean things about the senior team, and they're like, oh, they've forgotten what it's like to have, to teach a full
That's
load and
it.
to mark loads of books. And the senior leaders are often understandably quite hurt by that. But equally, it can work the other way as well. And people often develop this almost like an adversarial role where it's like, we're telling you what to do and you're not doing it. And therefore you're in trouble or something. And it ends up with this sort of strong man, sort of like my way or the highway kind of power disequilibrium, if you like. And it's not nice to be on either side of that equation, really. But often leaders feel like that's the way that you should do your job, is just to be strong and to push this through against the resistors.
I
And the
think
chemical.
what I think what that's definitely prevalent in our institutions. So that's something cultural, isn't it? That we have this transactional analysis that's quite parent-child, and
Mm,
then we perform within it when we get into those roles because the institutions, whatever. I've coached lots of different institutions, NHS, police, and schools. They kind of lend themselves to that, don't they? And in some school communities, they've managed to break out of that, and that's where there can be some real richness in change work.
yeah, I think so. And there are a few ways in which that power is sort of redistributed in this process, without removing the authority of school leaders, but it's just bringing more people into the process. We call it use like a glass box approach rather than a black box, because that's the other thing is the senior teams, they often make their decisions in senior team meetings, which are closed off, right? They don't publish the minutes of those meetings. There's no public viewing gallery like there is in Parliament or in your local council. It's a black box approach, and therefore it's opaque, and people just get. The government does this all the time. Like they just they are not. It's funny. I noticed just yesterday they've U-turned now on digital ID cards again. A while ago they just launched it out of the clear blue sky, just like we're going to do ID cards. You're like, guys, like where's the
Um,
consultation? Where's the conversation? Where's the like, there's a case for ID cards, perhaps. There's reasons to do it as well as reasons to not do it, but it's just done in this very unthinking top-down way. And
yeah,
before that, they did it with like what was it? The winter fuel allowance payments. They were just like that just came out of the clear blue sky, and it just gets everybody's backs up when you're sort of told what to do from this position of like black box opaque decision making. And so being transparent, bringing people into the process, having things like tight but loose as well. So there's like talking to people and say, what are the non-negotiables? What are the things that we all just have to be absolutely aligned on? And then where can we adapt things to different contexts, for example? So it might be that there's a whole school expectation that the kids line up outside the classroom door and that the teacher waits at the door. And that's probably good for most of the time. But in some cases where the teacher's coming from the other end of the school because they've just taught the other end of the site, it's much better if the kids just get into the room, because that corridor is really narrow and it's just causing friction with the kids queuing up the other way, right? Whatever it is. So you always need to have little bits of fine tuning so that people can adapt things to their local context. And you trust people to make those calls. And that really makes people feel like they matter, right? That really makes people like they count and that they are important. And that's so key. And that's something that's really lost in this very sort of strong arm authoritarian sort of approach that we often see in schools. And so just as a final point on this, I think that one thing that's really interesting me about applying this work to behavior is that it applies to schools where behavior on paper looks like it's really good. It looks like there's children are very orderly in corridors and what have you, and everyone's in line. But if that's a culture that's dominated by fear, then that's going to cause all kinds of other problems. And so like it's possible to have good behavior without doing that very sort of strong arm thing. Sometimes it might be necessary in a transitional period to have like very tight lines, to tighten the screws, as it were. But then as systems get into place, you can loosen that stuff over time. You don't have to remain in this super duper strict format forever. You can allow people to express their views, to become a part of the conversation. And so, yeah, that's probably the number one thing is slice teams. But we can maybe get into yeah, there's loads of other ideas that apply to behavior.
And in the business of slice teams, what occurred to me when you were speaking there, and how our conversation naturally went to power dynamics, transaction analysis, top down, all of that conversation. In a slice team, is the head teacher present? Who's leading it? So I don't know if you could then put a slice team together and then accidentally end up back in this. Like, how would you make sure that doesn't happen? Or
Yeah, great question. So sometimes the head teacher's involved, usually not. Like they tend to be in smaller primary schools where there's just fewer people and the head is much more sort of hands-on. But generally a senior leader is involved, and absolutely, you can end up back in that hierarchy, especially if the senior leader feels like they have a veto, right? So whatever the slice team comes up with, it's essentially just a talking shop, but the senior leader is still calling the shots. If you do that, then you might as well not bother because you're just wasting everybody's time. So it has to be genuinely equitable, and you're essentially devolving responsibility for this particular aspect of school improvement to the slice team. And the way that you prevent it from falling back into a pyramid is that you use a set of ground rules. And so you agree as a team at the outset. You say things like, we're all equally responsible here, even though there's an implicit or even an explicit hierarchy around this table. I'm the head teacher, you're a teaching assistant, you're the Senko, you're a classroom teacher, you've been here for 30 years, you just arrived last week, right? There's all kinds of different hierarchies at play there. You're a pupil. But around this table, we're all equals. We are all equally responsible for addressing this area of school improvement and for sharing ideas and for actually not just for writing a plan, but for also seeing it through over time. And the leader will naturally take on some of that responsibility when it comes to implementing the plan, because they have a reduced timetable, because they have responsibility. They will maybe take on responsibility for collecting data or for running the comms plan. Perhaps we'll come on to communications in a minute. But everybody's equally responsible for this. And the next one would be everybody should commit to sharing all relevant information, especially inconvenient information. In other words, like if somebody says something and you disagree, like we need, or if you're not sure about it, or if you just, if you want to challenge that a little bit and just test their thinking, we need to have those kind of robust conversations around this table. If we're making decisions that affect many people's lives, then we need to really stress test our thinking. And so we need to really sort of be very prepared to share our honest views without fear of repercussion. And likewise, be prepared to have our own views challenged where appropriate. And people really like it when you set up ground rules in this way. People are often like, "Oh, cool! This is interesting. This is not like it usually works." And even so, you might say, but people will still, they still won't want to contradict the head teacher, right? Because it is still the boss after all. But there are safe ways that you can do it. And so one way is to do this thing called 5-minute interviews. And so let's say you've come up with this plan for how to improve behavior at the school. You take it out to people around the school. So each member of the slice team goes and talks to other people like them. So the middle leader talks to other middle leaders, the teaching assistant likewise. And it's best to do that face to face. And you say things like, what do you think about this 5-point plan that we've come up with for behavior? Do you agree that this is a priority for the school at this point in time? Do you think that we've got this right? What ideas do you have? What questions do you have? What concerns do you have? What do you think, basically? And then they bring that information back to the slice team. They ask maybe 2 or 3 people who are like them. You don't have to talk to everybody in the whole place. Just do a sample. But each, if you've got a slice team of 5 people and they each talk to 3 people, then you've got 15 perspectives, which is really valuable, especially if they're talking to representative samples. So they're not just talking to people who are like them, right? And also the slice team members can roll in their own views with the views that they are hearing from other people, and that's done in an anonymous way. So they don't say, "Oh, Tara thinks this is a terrible idea because blah blah blah." You just sort of say, "Oh, people are concerned about this aspect of what we're doing," and so it provides this really like safe mechanism by which we can have it out. By which we can have these honest exchanges of views without anybody being sort of named and shamed and feeling awkward about the implications of that. So yeah, there are things that we can do to avoid falling back into that pyramidal groupthink type situation.
I love that. And I was thinking about, I'm a coach and I coach all different groups. And sometimes I do what's called teaming. So it's group coaching. And the ground rules, or as we would call it, the contracting, it's such a wonderful time to set the tone. And it sort of flicks the switch as well. People kind of go, this is my engaged hat. It goes on, right, this is what we're doing. And people sort of shift the way they're going to behave. Sometimes you literally see them physically shift, like, right, I'm getting into my zone to be able to contribute, to think, to engage. And it changes the uptake, changes how seriously people take it, changes their commitment. And it's a really important part. And I think sometimes when we bring people together, we can forget about contracting or ground rules and agreeing those ground rules. Because when things slip into we're having a bit of a moan about a member of staff, or we've broken confidentiality, you've got something to return to. When you don't have something to return to, it can feel a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lovely.
Yeah.
I'd love to know. I mean, slice group sounds like it really does speak of something very important in terms of understanding how everyone can contribute, and that is vital in change. What other areas do you think really apply to behaviour in schools?
Yeah, so one of the things that I found when I was writing this book is that there are loads of tools or processes or strategies, whatever you want to call them, that are just widely used. They're like bread and butter sort of basic things in businesses, in governments, in charities, in basically any large organization. And that includes things like having a communications plan. It includes things like doing a root cause analysis if you want to get to the heart of a problem. It includes things like project management, doing a pre-mortem so that you're sort of anticipating problems before they happen. Loads of things that for reasons that I still am not really very sure about, they are just not happening in education. And not only that, but there's almost a sort of an allergy to things like this. So like I was, when I went on one podcast and I was talking about comms plan, and they were like, "Oh, that sounds a bit corporate. Oh, I don't like the sound
when
of
you
that."
said root cause analysis, the teacher in me, there's a few versions of Tara, but the teacher Tara went, "Oh, that sounds really corporate," and giggled inside.
Really?
And it's so important. And we do it in other ways. We maybe don't call it that, but absolutely.
Really? Root cause analysis is really like an engineering thing, right? So like I was talking with my uncle over Christmas, and he used to work at Philips. And we had a really interesting chat about like he was back in the day when they were making cathode ray tube TV screens. And there was a little tiny bubble that was appearing on the TV screens, and they couldn't work it out. And he sort of assembled essentially a slice team. He got the engineers and the plant workers and people at different parts of this process, and they went through it like with a minute level, like step by step by step, and they finally figured out what was causing this little bubble on the screens. And so it's mainly like an engineering thing, I think, which businesses have got hold of. But yeah, this isn't that interesting. Teacher Tara, there's an active allergy to this. Comms planning to root cause analysis, project management, right? But like what so often when I talk to senior teams and I sort of say, do you have a communications plan? And they're like, oh no, we've not, like we've never really thought about. And you're like, you're running an organization that's got like 1,500 people in it with all these different stakeholders, and there's loads going on. You've got like 6 different things on your school improvement plan. Like, how do you expect people to know what's important at any point in time? Like, how can you not have a communications plan when you're running an organization of that size? Like, it's wild to me that is not just like a bread and butter thing. Um, and so that would be one thing, is like having, and it's the thing that people almost always say when you do that pre-mortem, or you sort of say, oh, like, what's it like? And you just go, it's a communication breakdown. Or it's bad communication, or, like, we're sort of not invited to meetings. Or I was talking to a teacher the other day, and they were saying that they often find out that things are happening through the kids. And the kids are saying, oh yeah, no, we're not in tomorrow because there's something, we're going on. And you're like, oh really? That would have been nice to know, but like, what's happening here? Like, so there's just the lack of comms is a massive one. There are lots of different comms types, right? So there's one to many, right? So there's broadcast communications, like an assembly or email to all staff, the dreaded blanket email. There's the whatever, the newsletter, the website, one to many stuff. And then there's one to one, just like personal communication, a phone call home, a quiet conversation with somebody, a postcard home, say. There's many to one, which is like the reverse of that, really, which is essentially data collection, or perhaps like a suggestion box, or you might have like a Slice team inbox where people can share their thoughts. And there's also many to many, where people are having people are having conversations with lots of other people, like at things like open evenings and parents' evenings and coffee mornings and staff training, like dialogic approaches to staff training, talking assemblies, all that sort of thing. So there's loads of different ways in which we can communicate. And what you really want to do is to have like a coordinated effort. So you write a comms plan where you sort of say, right, so who needs to know X, Y, and Z about what's happening? So there's teaching assistants need to be aware of X, Y, and Z, and middle leaders need to be aware of this because this is going to be happening at this time. And so it's just coordinated essentially. And then you set reminders. It doesn't take long to write one of these things. Then you set reminders in the calendar. And so when it's time for person X to send a survey out to the people in their in their department, or to parents or whatever, then it just happens like clockwork, and the comms happens. And then everybody, and it's essentially just about, we have a mental dashboard, right? You sort of know, and there's about sort of 4 or 5 things that might be blinking on your mental dashboard at any point in time. And if that light stops flashing, you just forget that thing exists. And it's sort of, people talk about it going on the back burner, as it were, and then it sort of falls down the back of the oven and goes moldy. You don't even know it's there. It's just gone. And something else starts flashing in its place, of course. And so, there's all these competing agendas competing for our attention. And so all a comms plan does really is just make sure that this thing remains on people's mental dashboards. And and that you're using a number of different people. So sometimes it's the teaching assistant who will stand up in a staff briefing and talk about something that they've done in relation to behavior. It might be a lunchtime supervisor. It might be, an early career teacher. So it's not necessarily the usual suspects. Communicating with different groups, with different sort of groups of stakeholders within the school community, sometimes parents and what have you, sometimes the local newspaper maybe. And yeah, using different channels to make sure that this stuff is just remaining on people's mental dashboards when it needs to be. So that would be one. Have you ever come across schools using comms plans?
I've not come across a school using comms plans. I've come across schools who would definitely benefit from them.
Basically every school in the world.
And I think, and there's such an appetite for it, but maybe not a plan for it. So people are like, oh my goodness, like you said, communication. It would be nice to know. Oh, there's too much communication. Oh, there's too many emails. Schools that are sending out maybe 3 or 4 central communications a day to parents. I mean, then parents feel overwhelmed. Like, you start to eye roll your school getting in touch with you, which is not what how you want to feel.
Yeah.
And they're feeling like we're doing our very best. So yeah, I think maybe even understanding how people want to be contacted.
Yeah.
safe to is a really important part, isn't it?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and all the ways that you kind of listed, I was like, I'm loving the fact that there's so many different ways, and people will have preferences within that.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. And so I'm just like, I've got a big long list here, of like, there's loads of ways basically in which the ideas in making change stick could be applied to behavior.
That
Um,
seems like a nice way to sort of start to close. If you can give us some of those really lovely ideas, and I bet we'll get lots of interest in how to move forward with them.
yeah. So since we've just thrown shade at the root cause analysis, let's go there. And so let's say that there's lots of issues with, like, you had a what, we're recording this in January, right? So let's say you had this, you launched your behavior policy in September, and it was really tight, and everyone had had a day of training on it, and it was all like, we're checking uniforms at the door, and then whatever, and for whatever reason that's not happening now, and like the blinking light on the dashboard has gone off, and people's attention has gone elsewhere. Maybe Ofsted have announced that they're coming, or you're into the Ofsted window or something like that. Everyone's getting on top of their marking. And so um, the behavior starts to bubble up, and there's disruptive behavior happening, and you notice that there's an increase in detentions, there's more call outs happening. And the temptation is to just sort of say, right, we need to get everybody back on the same page. So we're going to just do a twilight. We'll get everybody in the hall at the same time, and we'll just remind them, here's the behavior policy. This is what you're supposed to be doing. And already there's a bit of blame creeping in there, isn't it? It's like, you're clearly not doing what you should be doing, because this is, so again, that sort of us and them dynamic appears. Or it might be that they would say, all right, we need to, like, our consequences ladder is too complicated, like, because they've noticed this. Maybe two people have mentioned it, so they're like, right, we're going to revise the consequences ladder, and we're just going to make it C1, C2, C3, and then they're out of the lesson and whatever. So they come up with some sort of top down thing, and they go, right, this is going to fix that problem. It's like a sort of sticking plaster approach, but you don't know why that's happening. Like, you don't know what the root cause of that is. And so your sticking plaster might be just like you're blindly just sticking it onto some part of the body, just like hoping that it stems the bleeding. Sorry, that's a bit of a horrible metaphor, but and so there's loads of ways that you can do a root cause analysis, right? So there's things like fishbone diagrams and causal maps, and there's a thing called the 5 whys, where you just keep asking why. Well, there's one that I really like called the problem solution tree, right? And so you have a tree, and the metaphor sort of explains itself really. The tree is the core of the problem. You've got disruptive behavior in lessons and what have you, people calling out, people wandering around, people challenging the teacher and what have you. And then what are the consequences? So the branches of the tree are the consequences. How does this show up? What's happening? And so we have, disruptions in lessons, we have lost learning time, we have more detentions, there's more of a bureaucracy burden there, because teachers are having to administrate detentions and what have you, chase them up if the kids don't arrive at them. Kids are not learning as effectively, teachers are stressed out. They're a very similar, set of problems that we see in relation to behavior. And then we say, so, okay, so what's going on in the roots? What are the root causes of this? And there could be loads of reasons, right? And it's not necessarily the consequence ladder. It could be, I don't know. I mean, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. Just like off the top of your head, can you think of any reasons why behavior might be starting to bubble up?
Gosh, thousands probably. But we're tired. It's the end of term.
Mm-hmm.
We've got exams coming up. There's the weather.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There could be loads of things. It could be like there's people struggling with mental health and well-being. It could be that the issues are like to do with literacy, right? That they are like, they're just really struggling to access the work. The work is being pitched too high, and it's just they can't access it, and it makes them feel bad, and so they're going to act out because they just like it's a way for them to save face, or for them to shore up their self-worth by sometimes kids get kicked out of lessons on purpose, don't they, right? And so basically, yeah, you don't know, and so like don't reach for a solution until you really understand what's going on. And so the root cause analysis is a really powerful activity where you go through this process, and you can look at different categories. Is the issue physical? Is it perhaps to do with the physical layout of the day? Is it the fact that the kids are physically tired, or the teachers are physically tired? Is it to do with the timetable? Is it something that's just like logistical thing that we can figure out? Is it about is there just like not enough time at the lunchtime, and there's everyone's squished into the canteen queue and what have you? Is it emotional? Is it the kids are just like emotionally dysregulated, and that they're not able to sort of just to ride the wave of the ups and downs of the school day, and so they're sort of acting out because they're not really in control of their behaviors? Is it a habit thing? Is it just that they're sort of like the teachers have fallen out of the habit of doing things that really prevent behavior from escalating? Or is it that the kids have just got into bad habits, or the teachers got into the habit of not waiting for silence before they, whatever it might be? Is it relational? Is it about the relations that have been damaged, and that's the thing that's really the cause of it? Is it cognitive? Is it that the kids don't understand something, or the teachers don't understand something? Or is it a navigational thing? Is it like you don't really know how to, you sort of know that things are not right, and you know where you want to be, but you just don't really know how to get from A to B. So how can you sort of steer your ship, as it were, from where you are to where you want to be? And so you can analyze the possible root causes under each of these different headings, and then you put together solutions that target those root causes at their roots, right? And and that allows you to think in quite a smart sort of diagnostic way, understanding the true nature of a problem, and then designing strategies that a bit like we saw with the root cause analysis in Cincinnati Children's Hospital, that they encounter problems and then just think creatively, how can we solve this problem? How can we solve this problem? And that's actually the fun bit. It's really not hard to address those things once you can see what's happening.
And I just think when I'm listening to that, there's such an interlinking, because once you've got the root cause, then you need to do the communication piece, don't you, really well, so people know why you're making that choice against why against that root cause. And sometimes we don't communicate that bit. So, and that's the stuff that says, oh, you don't matter. There's the mattering is depleted because, well, I don't know why I'm doing what I'm doing, or my part in this bigger picture. Mm-hmm. So yes, it's so interesting how all of these facets create a better change experience.
Yeah, I was doing a session yesterday. I'm doing this. I've worked with Oracy Cambridge, and we're doing a ongoing program with a group of 3 different local authorities in London, and we were talking yesterday about behaviour. So I started asking them about. We were talking about root cause analysis, and they started talking about behaviour. And at first, I sort of thought, oh, maybe this person didn't understand. Maybe I didn't set up the activity properly. Because he's talking about behavior, but we're here to talk about oracy. But then he brought it round to oracy, and he was like, and then I asked him about it later, and he's like, we've seen our behavior improve so much since we've been focusing on oracy, because a lot of the issues were that the children weren't able to express themselves, they weren't able to resolve conflicts, they didn't really understand like what other people thought about X, Y, or Z, and so there was just misunderstandings and just sort of people falling out for stupid reasons. And so oracy was really fundamental to improving behavior outcomes. And again, it's not something that I've ever heard anybody say before, but they had done the root cause thinking, and they had arrived at this understanding that that's actually the way to improve behavior is by focusing on oracy. And so it can lead you to some quite surprising, but sort of, fruitful places. And then that's just to end on the fruit thing. What's lovely as at the end of that exercise, so you come up with these solutions to your root cause problems, and then you say, right, let's now reimagine our tree, right? So like now the trunk of the tree is that there is 0 disruptive behavior happening. Let's be really utopian here. We've nailed this problem. It doesn't happen, or whenever something like that happens, it's dealt with really like as effectively as possible. The school is a well-oiled machine. So like now that is happening, what's happening in the branches of our tree now? What are the consequences of that, right? So the children feel that they're safe, that they matter, they're learning effectively. The teachers want to stay at that school because they feel really good. So turnover decreases. And it's like you get all of these lovely sort of knock-on positive outcomes. And this tree starts to grow, blossom, and then bear fruit. And so it's a very powerful activity because it really allows you to see the problem, the consequences of the problem, what's causing it, and also then to reimagine this brighter future, which sort of all follows logically, you know.
And then you can really you're energized to step towards it. I just genuinely felt joy going through the imagined process, James. It's
Yeah, it's
powerful.
good stuff.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Right, well, we should probably wrap it up there. I can, as you can tell, I can talk about this stuff all day. There is more to this, and so we've just started to put our heads together on this question. And if anybody watching or listening to this is interested to hear more, Tara and I are thinking about putting some sort of an offer together to schools. If you're interested in exploring these two ideas, which, as we've seen, are very sort of interlinked, applying the tools of implementation and improvement science, especially around sort of representative decision making, and using some of these tools that we've looked at today, and the psychology of mattering, and making it so that people throughout the school community feel valued and that they add value to the school community, then get in touch, and we will see if we can come up with something that schools might find helpful.
Lovely, and look forward to that very much. Thank you very much, James, for having me on and for allowing me to get to know and understand your Making Change Stick vision.
How it is and how it should be, wrestling in the streets again. One's got the other by its expectations. The other is going for a submission. Hope has stoicism by the neck. Acceptance is struggling for breath. Driving has it on the ropes. What I want is being choked. My wheels being dragged through a hedge backwards. But not before it bloodied the nose of the world. Happy as it boxed the ears of change. Contented, assaulted. Progress with a change. Can go.